The Galactic market station was louder than ever before, a giant floating city built from silver alloy plates and glowing blue vents, suspended above a red dwarf star and famous across the universe as the one place where every species, peaceful or hostile, came to trade, show off, gossip, and quietly judge everyone else. And this year's expo was supposed to be the biggest one yet, with representatives from 40 worlds gathering, their ships docking one after another like beads sliding onto a string, releasing crowds of aliens into the enormous halls filled with orbs of neon light, floating market stalls, gravity-shifting walkways, and banners announcing new technologies, powerful weapons, rare crystals, and exotic creatures. But despite all the excitement, one thing overshadowed the expo more than anything else. Humans were attending for the first time. Most aliens had only heard rumors about humans, death-world primates, unpredictable, emotional, sometimes scary, sometimes kind. But no one had actually seen them in person except a few diplomats. So when the first Terran delegation walked through the main entrance, every head turned, every whisper rose, and every alien froze in a mixture of curiosity and caution, expecting something terrifying, something monstrous. But what they saw instead made the entire station burst into confused laughter. Because behind every human walked a four-legged creature. Small, furry, bright-eyed, wagging tails, moving happily like they were on a picnic instead of walking into the most powerful military and political expo in the galaxy. A Zorth noble, tall and thin with green glass-like skin, snorted loudly and slapped his chest plate in amusement, shouting, "The Deathworlders have brought pets. They walk with tiny beasts. What is this comedy?" Other aliens joined the laughter, shrill chirps, rasping hisses, hooting echoes, until the entire hall vibrated with mocking amusement. Meanwhile the humans simply smiled, patting their dogs gently, completely unfazed by the laughter around them. And the dogs trotted along confidently, sniffing the air, occasionally wagging at strangers, ignoring the insults as if they didn't understand or didn't care. One alien merchant whispered to her partner, "Are humans really that naive? They bring fragile little creatures to a place full of predators." While another muttered, "Weak species always surround themselves with weaker animals. It makes them feel strong." But the humans weren't offended. If anything, they seemed amused by the aliens' confusion. A tall human ambassador named Michael Parker stepped forward, his dog Max walking proudly beside him, and greeted the nearest alien with a warm smile, saying, "Good morning," while Max let out a cheerful bark that made several aliens flinch in fear, completely unsure whether the sound was friendly or a Deathworld warning. Despite the tension, the expo continued, though the aliens couldn't stop staring at the dogs. Some wondered if they were weapons, others suspected they carried diseases, and a few scientists even approached cautiously to scan them, only to be gently warning growled at, causing them to retreat immediately. Yet even then, the aliens still laughed, still joked among themselves about the tiny earth animals, completely unaware of the truth hidden beneath the wagging tails and soft fur. Because dogs weren't fragile. They weren't helpless. They weren't simple pets. They were Deathworld predators, descendants of wolves, built for survival, loyalty, hunting, and protecting their pack. They didn't fear danger, they ran into it. They didn't break easily, they adapted instantly, and most importantly, they loved their humans so deeply that they would fight the universe itself to protect them. But none of the aliens knew that yet. They thought humans were foolish. They thought dogs were harmless toys. And security officers continued to wave them off, repeating, "Relax, they're just pets." As if the dogs were incapable of anything more than being cute. Everything changed in the 5th hour of the expo. The halls were packed, scents of strange foods filling the air, energy shields flickering around exhibits, and alien nobles parading their armor and weaponry while bragging about their strength. When a criminal gang known as the Vakul Shadows slipped into the crowd. They were infamous for smuggling, kidnapping, and selling hostages to warlords, and today they had only one target, the human ambassador. They thought humans were weak. They thought their pets were distractions. They thought capturing a human would be easy. They couldn't have been more wrong. The attack happened in seconds. The gang shoved through the crowd, grabbed Ambassador Parker by the arm, pulled him back violently, and pressed a shock blade against his ribs, sending waves of pain through him. He grunted in shock, stumbling backward, his diplomatic guards caught off guard, and the aliens around them screamed and scattered, creating a circle of chaos. Max, the ambassador's dog, froze for one heartbeat, just one. But that was all it took to unleash something ancient inside him. His ears shot up. His pupils locked onto the attacker's arm. His lips curled back. And then something eerie happened. Across the entire hall, every human dog, big ones, small ones, fluffy ones, old ones, young ones, lifted their heads at the exact same moment. The laughter stopped. The alien chatter faded. Even the neon lights seemed to dim. A silence fell across the massive hall so heavy it felt like gravity itself had multiplied. And then, deep, rumbling, terrifying, a low growl rolled across the entire station. Not from one dog. Not from 10 but from hundreds of Deathworld creatures responding to a member of their pack being attacked. Aliens froze in shock, their hearts seizing, their instincts screaming at them to run, because that growl wasn't cute, wasn't funny, wasn't harmless. It was the sound wolves made before a kill. It was the sound predators made before tearing apart anything that threatened their family. The Zorth noble who mocked them earlier went pale, whispering, What is this sound?" A Threx soldier dropped his weapon in terror. A merchant fainted on the spot. And the Varkul kidnapper holding the ambassador stiffened, suddenly realizing too late that he had made the biggest mistake of his life. Max stepped forward, eyes burning with a primal intelligence no alien expected, teeth glinting as he growled louder, deeper, deadlier, and every other dog mirrored him perfectly, forming an invisible network of animal fury spanning the entire hall. Aliens felt their skin crawl as they sensed something ancient, powerful, unstoppable awakening before their eyes. A security officer whispered, voice shaking, "I thought they were harmless." Another croaked, "What are these creatures?" But the humans weren't moving. They weren't shouting. They weren't panicking. They were calm, terrifyingly calm, because they knew what came next. Dogs on a Deathworld had one ruling instinct: protect the pack. Someone had attacked their pack, and the dogs were about to show the galaxy why threatening a human was the worst mistake any creature could make. In that frozen moment, the universe witnessed something it had never seen before. Not human strength, not human anger, not human weapons, but something older, deeper, more primal. The unstoppable fury of a loyal dog defending the person they loved most. And the galaxy finally understood that the humans hadn't brought pets, they had brought guardians, and those guardians were ready to unleash hell. The moment Ambassador Parker felt the cold blade press into his ribs and heard the criminal whisper, "One more move and I cut him," his breath caught in his throat, not from fear for himself, but from fear for what would happen next, because he knew the dogs were already reacting on instinct. He knew Max's heartbeat had spiked into that deadly rhythm he only heard when danger appeared, and he knew the entire station was seconds away from witnessing something it was absolutely not ready for. And as the kidnapper yanked him backward toward an emergency exit, Max took a single slow step forward, muscles coiled like steel cables under fur, eyes locked so intensely that the alien holding the ambassador felt his skin crawl even though he couldn't explain why. And then the growl in the hall deepened, spreading like rolling thunder, making overhead lights flicker and loose banners sway, causing alien species with height advantage to crouch low and hide, their instincts screaming that something terrifying was about to strike. The gang leader snarled, tightening his grip on Parker, shouting, "Control your animals or I'll." But he didn't get to finish the sentence, because Max lunged with such explosive speed that the alien barely saw a blur before the dog slammed into his arm with a force no small creature should logically possess, bone crunching under the impact as the blade skittered across the floor. The criminal howled in pain, dropping the ambassador, and Max placed himself between Parker and the attackers. Instantly, body low, teeth bared, chest vibrating with a wrathful snarl that echoed through the entire hall. The aliens gasped, stumbling backward, their earlier laughter turning into sharp, terrified breaths as they watched Max transform from a friendly pet into a guardian beast, every hair raised like a warrior ready for war. And just as the criminal gang tried to regroup, the other dogs moved, not randomly, not wildly, but with perfect coordination, like a single pack with one mind, flowing across the hall in synchronized motion. One dog darted between the legs of a second attacker, knocking him off balance. Another snapped onto a wrist holding a stun gun, disarming him instantly, and three more formed a protective barrier around the ambassador, barking in sharp warning bursts that vibrated through the floor. Aliens stared in disbelief because they had never seen animals work like this. Soldiers trained their whole lives couldn't coordinate with such speed, precision, and purpose. Even the station's elite security unit, stationed nearby, froze with their hands half-raised, unable to understand how creatures shorter than their knees could move with the efficiency of military strike teams. A Zorth biologist, trembling so hard his scanner dropped to the floor, whispered, "They're communicating, not with words, but with instincts, signals, micro-movements. How is this possible?" A Threx general watching from the balcony answered with fear in his voice, "Because they evolved on the same death world as humans. These creatures grew alongside predators that would annihilate any species that hesitated." Meanwhile, the criminals panicked. They had expected humans to fight back, not that the pets would launch themselves into battle, and definitely not that the humans would remain completely calm while it happened. Ambassador Parker stood behind Max, breathing hard, but not in terror. He simply placed a steady hand on Max's back, grounding the dog, signaling silently, "I'm here. I'm okay," and Max stiffened protectively, letting out a single sharp bark so loud it echoed down the corridor and summoned more dogs from other expo halls, their paws thundering across the floor like the first drops of a deadly rainstorm. In seconds, dozens more dogs flooded into the area, forming layers of protection around the humans, their senses locked onto the criminals' movements. They didn't attack mindlessly, they didn't bite everyone, they only targeted the threats. Those who lifted weapons, those whose heartbeats spiked with aggression, those whose scent changed with fear-driven violence. The aliens watching couldn't believe it. They could feel it. The dogs weren't acting like pets. They were acting like trained soldiers, like guardians with a code older than any galactic law. And then the tension snapped when one desperate attacker grabbed a nearby alien child and pressed a stun gun to her neck, screaming, "Back off or she dies." The hall gasped, mothers and fathers of alien species shrieking in horror, but Max and the other dogs didn't hesitate. They all turned toward the attacker in unison, eyes going cold, their bodies lowering into that terrifying predator stance the galaxy had never witnessed before. The child whimpered, trembling under the alien's grip, and every dog froze, tails straight, ears forward, their instincts shifting instantly from offense to rescue mode. A human medic named Sarah stepped forward slowly, hands raised, speaking softly, "Let her go. You don't want to do this." And behind her the dogs held their positions, muscles trembling with restraint, because threatening a human was one thing, but threatening a helpless child triggered something far more dangerous inside them. The criminal sneered, pulling the child closer, and that was the final mistake he ever made. Before anyone could blink, a German shepherd named Kira launched herself from across the hall, covering 10 meters in a single leap, slamming into the attacker's arm with surgical precision, disarming him without touching the child, pulling his hand backward with a force so clean and controlled that the stun gun clattered harmlessly to the floor. The child fell forward into Sarah's arms as the alien screamed, clutching his fractured wrist, and the other dogs surged around him like a sea closing. Over a single drop, not attacking, but pinning him down with growls that vibrated like earthquakes. For the first time, aliens truly understood. Dogs were not trained to kill. They were trained to protect. And their restraint, the way they disabled without destroying, made them even more terrifying. The station commander, who had earlier dismissed the dogs as harmless, now stared with wide eyes, whispering, "These creatures, they're responding faster than any security system. They're identifying threats before we do." But another officer, voice shaking, responded, "No, Commander. They're not responding, they're defending their family." And that single sentence spread through the crowd like wildfire, rewriting every assumption aliens had ever made about humans and their animals. Dogs weren't companions. They were pack-bonded protectors forged in the fires of a death world. Human emotions weren't weaknesses. They were anchors that made these creatures unstoppable. And attacking a human wasn't just an act of aggression. It was an invitation for every dog in the area to unleash instincts older than civilization itself. As the last criminal fell to the floor, trembling under the weight of multiple growling guardians, Max stepped forward, chest heaving, teeth still bared, and pushed his nose into Ambassador Parker's hand, confirming he was safe. Parker exhaled shakily and knelt down, placing both hands on Max's cheeks, whispering, "Good boy. I'm okay, you saved us all." And Max closed his eyes, pressing his forehead against Parker's, the moment soft and emotional despite the chaos around them. Aliens who had mocked them earlier now stared in silent awe, because they weren't looking at a pet comforting its owner. They were looking at a warrior reporting to his commander. And in that single, powerful moment, the galaxy learned the one rule it would never forget: threaten a human, and you face the fury of every dog in the room. The criminal's screams had barely faded when the entire expo hall erupted into chaotic motion. Not panic exactly, but a confused, stunned whirlwind of alien activity as species that once mocked the dogs now clung to the walls, trembling as the last echoes of growls vibrated through their bodies like a predator's breath against the back of their necks, and every alien scientist, soldier, trader, noble, and diplomat suddenly saw the dogs for what they truly were: not toys, not pets, but evolved pack hunters from a death world where only the smartest, fastest, most loyal survived, moving with precision so natural it bordered on supernatural. And as the dogs repositioned themselves around the humans, forming perfect protective circles, aliens watched in disbelief because the coordination was too perfect, too intentional, too practiced. This wasn't chaos, this was strategy carved into instinct across thousands of years. A Zorth biologist dropped to his knees, scanning the nearest dog while shaking violently, whispering, "Their neural pathways, impossible. They're reading our micro-movements. They're predicting threats before they happen." While a Varn soldier backed into a wall, muttering, "Their eyes, look at their eyes, they're analyzing everything." Meanwhile, Max, Kira, and the rest of the dogs didn't celebrate, didn't bark triumphantly, didn't jump or run around. They remained locked in full alert mode, every ear twitch reacting to the slightest rustle, every tail low and stiff, every set of paws planted firmly on the ground as if preparing for another attack. And that terrified the aliens even more because no animal they knew remained so calm after violence. In their cultures, creatures either fled or went berserk, but dogs did neither. They stayed focused, like guardians bred for war. A group of diplomats from the gentle Ileri species huddled together, eyes wide, whispering, "The humans did nothing. They didn't fight. They let the dogs defend them. Why?" And an old scholar beside them answered in a trembling voice, "Because on their death world, these creatures evolved to protect humans. Their bond is ancient, older than our histories." And then, something even more terrifying happened. One of the smaller dogs, barely the size of an alien child, walked toward the injured Ambassador Parker, sniffed his hands, checked his legs, lifted his head, and let out a soft, urgent whine. And Parker immediately understood what the dog was communicating, even without words. He knelt slowly, examined a bruise on his arm, and whispered, "I'm fine, buddy," while gently stroking the dog's head. And as simple as that moment was, aliens didn't understand how it was possible, how a creature without language could diagnose injury, understand emotional state, predict threats, and coordinate group movements perfectly. A Zorth general shook his head, voice cracking as he whispered, "This is impossible. They function like soldiers." But the most shocking part was yet to come. The remaining members of the Varkul gang tried to retreat toward Dock Hallway C, clutching their injured limbs, desperate to escape, and as they ran, their boots echoed sharply against the metal floor. But every dog's head snapped toward the sound instantly, eyes tracking the movement with chilling precision, and the criminals froze as they realized dozens of canine eyes glowed at them through the dim corridor lights, watching, calculating. The hall went dead silent again, thick with dread, as the criminals stumbled backward in terror, whispering, "They're hunting us." And in that moment, every alien species in the hall felt something primal awaken inside their evolutionary memory. A long-forgotten instinct that warned, something stronger than you is watching. But the dogs didn't move. Not yet. They waited, guarded, calculated. Because dogs don't chase unless someone they protect is in danger. That restraint, more than anything else, terrified the aliens. A scientist from the Koresh species stammered, "These creatures have emotional control, situational awareness, pack discipline. This isn't just instinct, this is intelligence." And as the criminals limped farther down the hall, trying to make it to an airlock, the humans remained entirely calm, trusting their companions more than they trusted weapons or security forces. Parker whispering to Max, "Just watch." And Max sat down, muscles tight, tail unmoving, waiting for his command like a soldier awaiting orders from a commander. And the aliens around them gasped again, because they understood what they were seeing. Hierarchy, communication, unity, a bond between species. So deep it transcended language. Through the wide glass windows, hundreds of expo attendees watched the scene from above, pressing their faces against the viewing panels as the dogs and humans below moved as one living unit. Every shift of a paw mirrored by a shift in human stance. Every change in human breathing mirrored by a dog lowering its head or raising its ears. And for the first time in recorded intergalactic history, aliens saw a dual-species combat bond, something no training, no bioengineering, no military force had ever achieved. A Threx commander, whose species spent centuries trying to create army-beast hybrids, whispered with shaking pride and fear. "This is what we tried to create, and failed. Humans already perfected it." And a Koresh engineer responded, voice breaking, "They didn't create it. They evolved with it." Meanwhile, the criminals finally reached Doc CS entrance, triggering alarms as they attempted to override the door, shouting hysterically at each other. "Hurry! Hurry! These beasts will tear us apart." But before they could escape, the dogs rose in unison, every single one of them, turning their heads toward Parker, waiting for one command. Parker inhaled slowly, eyes narrowing, and said only one word, "Guard." That was it. One syllable. One command. And the dogs moved like the ground itself had come alive, flowing forward silently, without barking, without growling, only focused, coordinated purpose, their paws tapping against the metal floor like rapid warning drums. The aliens watching from above clutched their seats as chills ran down their spines, because this was no longer an animal response. This was a tactical maneuver, a controlled pack advance, something they had only ever seen in elite military squads. The criminals screamed and fell backward as dozens of dogs approached them, forming a semicircle, blockading the exit, forcing the gang into a corner without laying a single tooth on them, proving again that dogs were not bloodthirsty. They were protectors, defenders, rescuers. And as Parker walked slowly toward the scene, unarmed, unafraid, the aliens realized something even more unsettling. The dogs weren't protecting humans because they were ordered to. They were protecting humans because they wanted to, because that bond ran deeper than instinct, deeper than training, deeper than evolution. It was love forged by survival on one of the deadliest worlds in the galaxy. The criminals were trapped, the station was frozen, and the galaxy had just learned that the mightiest weapon humanity possessed was not their ships, not their guns, not their armies. It was a loyal dog defending its human as the criminals trembled against the cold metal wall of Dock C. Their backs pressed hard enough to dent the panels, the entire station held its breath. Thousands of aliens watching from balconies and view windows with wide, terrified eyes, because what they were witnessing defied everything they thought they knew about humans, about animals, about evolution itself, yet the humans in the hall walked forward in calm silence. Their hands relaxed at their sides as if this was just another day, their breath steady, their eyes soft, not angry, not violent, just quietly determined. While their dogs formed a living shield around them, moving with eerie precision, shifting their weight, adjusting their positions like trained operatives who had rehearsed this choreography 1,000 times, and the aliens whispered among themselves, "How are they doing this? How do they communicate without words?" But the answer was already unfolding before them. Humans didn't need words, and dogs didn't need language. Their connection was ancient, instinctive, forged through thousands of years of surviving storms, predators, darkness, famine, and fear together on the deadliest world known. When Ambassador Parker stepped forward, Max walked exactly half a step ahead of him, like a soldier clearing the way for his commander, while two other dogs, Luna and Rex, flanked the human medic Sarah with flawless precision, detecting her quickened heartbeat and treating it as a signal to tighten formation. Alien generals who had trained soldiers for decades were stunned by the effortless discipline, muttering, "This is impossible. This level of pack coordination takes years of training." But Reed, another human delegate, simply kneeled beside his husky Shadow and brushed a hand along the dog's back, whispering, "Easy, boy," and Shadow responded instantly. His ears softened, his muscles loosened, but his eyes stayed locked onto the criminals like cold blue flames, and the aliens didn't understand how such gentle touch could switch a Deathworld predator from killing mode to controlled mode. And then one of the criminals, a desperate, shaking member of the Varkul gang, tried to make a last-ditch escape. He bolted to the left, sprinting past a row of crates, hoping to vanish into a maintenance tunnel before the dogs reacted. But the moment he moved, 3 dogs leapt with perfect timing, cutting off his escape path in 3 synchronized angles, trapping him without touching him, their paws landing silently, their chests low, their heads tilted slightly as they growled. Not loud, not wild, but low and controlled, the kind of growl that warned, "Don't make us hurt you." And the alien hit the floor, curling into a ball and sobbing. Above them, a Zorth noble grabbed the railing in shock, whispering. They outmaneuvered him without ever harming him. They know restraint. While a Koresh scientist whispered breathlessly. They can calculate threat level. They distinguish between danger and fear. This isn't instinct. This is intelligence. But the most powerful moment came when the dogs started herding civilians. Not attacking, not panicking, but guiding. A frightened alien child tripped while running toward her mother, and before any alien security officer could move, a golden retriever named Sunny sprinted across the hall, slid beneath the falling child, and gently lifted her with his back, nudging her upright, then walking beside her until she reached her mother safely. The entire balcony gasped, their disbelief turning into something softer, something emotional, something they had never expected to feel toward a species they once mocked. Respect. Even more astonishing, an elderly alien merchant collapsed from shock near a pillar, breathing erratically, and a small dog named Milo ran to him, pawed gently at his chest, barked softly 3 times, then turned to humans and barked again, different tone, urgent, specific, and Sarah ran toward him without hesitation, shouting, "He's having a cardiac episode." And when the aliens asked how the dog knew, Sarah answered simply, "They can smell heart attacks." And the entire station froze because no medicine, no scanning technology, no AI had detected the problem. But the dog did, in seconds. Meanwhile, the criminals, shaking uncontrollably, clung to each other as the dogs held them in place, not attacking, not chasing, not harming, just waiting. Waiting for their humans. Waiting for justice. Waiting because their purpose wasn't cruelty, it was protection. And the aliens finally saw the real difference between dogs and beasts. Beasts fight for hunger, fight for survival, fight for dominance. But dogs fight for love, loyalty, and family. Suddenly, one of the criminals raised his stun gun again, his hand trembling, his voice cracking as he screamed, "Stay back!" and aimed directly at Sarah. But before he could fire, Max bolted forward with blinding speed, leaping through the air like a missile, grabbing the weapon in his jaws and twisting his body mid-flight to yank the stun gun out of the alien's grip, landing with graceful power before sliding the weapon across the floor to Parker's feet, and the hall erupted into stunned silence as aliens witnessed a creature capable of disarming a fully armed criminal without spilling a single drop of blood. Even the station commander, once dismissive and arrogant, stepped forward with shaking hands and whispered to the nearest human, "You're animals. They save lives without killing. They protect the weak. They calculate threats. How do they know all this?" And Reed simply smiled softly and replied, "We didn't train them to be killers. We raised them to be family." Those words hit the aliens like gravity reversing in their chests. They looked at the dogs, fur covered in dust, teeth still bared, eyes still glowing, and felt their fear melt into a deep, overwhelming respect because they finally understood the truth humans had known for thousands of years. A dog didn't follow commands for reward. A dog followed out of love. And in the eyes of a dog, humans weren't masters. They were pack, home, and heart. The criminals surrendered completely after that, dropping their weapons, sliding down the walls, hands raised, terrified not of the humans but of the dogs who had shown more discipline, more intelligence, and more strategy than entire military divisions. And as the humans gathered their dogs close and comforted them gently, the aliens watching felt something change inside themselves, an ancient realization rising from the primitive corners of their minds. These death-world creatures weren't human pets, humans were theirs. And hurting a human meant challenging the one species in the galaxy evolution had designed to love with ferocity so strong it could shake entire civilizations. The station alarms blared through the metallic corridors like wounded sirens as news of the attack spread, and crowds of aliens flooded toward the viewing balconies overlooking Dock C, desperate to understand how a group of criminals had been stopped not by elite security, not by armed soldiers, but by a group of small, furry Earth creatures, and what they witnessed next would become one of the most replayed moments in galactic history, because as the criminals collapsed in defeat, breathing hard and staring into the circle of growling dogs, the humans didn't rush forward angrily the way most species assumed Deathworlders would. Instead, they walked calmly and silently, their footsteps soft and steady, their faces composed, while the dogs slowly shifted to create a path for them. Every movement precise, intentional, almost ceremonial, as if the dogs were welcoming their commanders onto a battlefield where the victory had already been secured. Ambassador Parker knelt beside Max, giving a soft scratch under his chin, and Max's breathing finally slowed, but even while accepting affection, his eyes never left the criminals, a living embodiment of loyalty and vigilance. Aliens watching this from above were trembling because the duality terrified them. How could a creature who looked gentle enough to cuddle a child instantly transform into a strategic protector capable of disabling threats faster than trained soldiers? A Zurian military tactician leaned forward, gripping the railing so hard his claws cracked the metal, muttering, "Their response time, their precision. No unit in the galaxy moves like that without implants." And beside him another alien replied, voice shaking, "They don't have implants, they have humans." And this simple truth rippled through the crowd. Meanwhile, the station's elite security force finally arrived, towering armored figures with plasma shields and electrospears, and shoved their way into the corridor, shouting, "Move aside. We'll handle control from here." But when they stepped forward, the dogs reacted instantly, lowering into guarded stances, forming a protective arc in front of the humans, and the security officers froze where they stood, because those canine eyes, sharp, focused, unwavering, sent a message so clear it bypassed language entirely. "You come near our humans, you answer to us." It took Parker raising a hand and saying calmly, "They're with us," before the dogs collectively relaxed, and aliens gasped again because this was the second shocking realization of the day. Dogs didn't obey orders out of fear. They obeyed because they trusted, respected, and loved their humans more than themselves. Then something even more unbelievable happened. One of the criminals, bleeding from his arm, suddenly tried to crawl toward a dropped plasma dagger, his hand shaking, desperation in his eyes, and before any security officer could even blink, 3 dogs launched forward with blinding speed. Max from the left, Luna from the right, Shadow straight down the center, executing a maneuver so synchronously perfect that alien tacticians watching nearly fainted, because it wasn't random, wasn't instinctual. Chaos, but a coordinated 3-point intercept pattern used only by advanced strike teams. Max pinned the criminal's wrist, Luna grabbed the weapon in her jaws, and Shadow positioned himself between Sarah and the attacker, lowering his body to shield her from every angle. It was a move no alien army had ever mastered. Not in centuries. The Zurian tactician whispered, voice hollow, This is military formation work. How can an Earth creature understand this?" And his assistant, staring in disbelief, answered, "Because they aren't alone. They evolved with humans. They learned with humans. They protect like humans." But the emotional blow came when the criminal leader, the one who first grabbed Parker, began groaning on the floor, clutching his stomach, trying to push himself away from Max, and in a trembling voice he whispered, I thought they were harmless." And Parker knelt beside him, voice calm, expression filled not with anger but disappointment, saying, "They are harmless. Until you hurt someone they love," and that single sentence cut through the hall like a blade, silencing every alien thought, every assumption, every prejudice they had ever believed about human pets. And as Parker rose to his feet, the dogs slowly circled him again. Protective, proud, loyal, aliens felt something heavy settle in their chests. Or, for the first time ever, they were seeing the heart of a Deathworld bond, not violence, not chaos, but a perfect balance of gentleness and ferocity, something no other species had achieved. Suddenly, a small alien girl slipped from the crowd, her tiny hands shaking, her antennae drooping, tears streaking her cheeks as she sobbed, "Are they going to hurt more people?" And before Parker could respond, a golden retriever named Sunny trotted toward her, tail lowered respectfully, ears soft, and gently nudged her hand with his nose, whining softly, offering comfort the same way he would to a frightened human child. The little girl sniffled, hesitated, then wrapped both arms around Sunny's neck, and the dog sat perfectly still so she wouldn't fall. Aliens watching inhaled sharply because they had just seen a creature that could break bones with one leap gently decide to become soft for a child it didn't know. And that was the moment the galaxy realized something deeper. Dogs didn't just protect humans. They protected anyone who needed it. Anyone who was scared. Anyone who was innocent. Anyone who felt alone. Because dogs weren't human-trained weapons, they were human-shaped hearts. As the security team handcuffed the criminals and escorted them away, still trembling from what they'd witnessed, every alien in the hall silently stepped aside, giving space, not to the humans, but to the dogs, because in their eyes, these small earth creatures had earned the respect of warriors, guardians, heroes. And as Parker walked out of Dock C with Max by his side, a new understanding washed over the aliens like a tidal wave. The strongest force humans brought to the galaxy wasn't their ships, or their guns, or their armies, but the creatures who would die before letting anything touch them as the criminals were dragged away and the shocked crowd slowly regained its breath. The tension in the Galactic market station did not fade. It grew heavier, thicker, almost electric, because even though the threat was gone, every alien in the hall could feel something massive shifting beneath the surface, something ancient and powerful awakening, and that something was the humans themselves. Up until now, they had allowed their dogs to handle the danger, allowed their companions to defend and protect, but when the last Varkul kidnapper spat blood onto the floor and shouted weakly, "Your animals fight better than you," the atmosphere snapped instantly, dogs freezing, tails low, ears stiff, every muscle tensing like a bowstring pulled to its limit, because the insult wasn't just noise. Dogs felt it, humans felt it, and the bond between them vibrated like two hearts beating through the same chest. Ambassador Parker stepped forward slowly, and every dog shifted with him, matching his rhythm as though they shared the same nervous system. And he looked down at the criminal with eyes that held no anger, only a quiet, incomprehensible sadness, and he said, "They didn't fight for themselves. They fought for us. That's why you lost." And the hall went silent again, because the aliens realized they were not witnessing humans commanding dogs. They were witnessing dogs amplifying humanity itself. Then, without warning, the station lights flickered red again. Another alarm. This time deeper, colder, far more frightening, and the automated system announced in a shaking robotic voice. Unauthorized energy surge detected. Unknown entity approaching upper docking ring. All personnel stand by, and as the words echoed, the dogs' reactions were instantaneous. Their heads whipped upward toward the ceiling, nostrils flaring, bodies tensing as they detected something the sensors could barely register. Something foreign in the air. The faintest scent of danger drifting down from above, and the humans felt it through them like a wave of instinctive fear crawling up their spines. Reed whispered, they sensed something, and Sarah grabbed the nearest railing as a rumble shook the floor, sending several aliens stumbling backward. Even the elite Zarth security unit braced themselves, but the dogs didn't move away. They moved closer to the humans, forming a tighter circle, a protective wall of fur and muscle and unwavering loyalty. Their growls low and synchronized, as if they shared one mind preparing for a second, far more dangerous threat. Then came the sound, a deep metallic screech ripping through the walls, and part of the upper docking ring buckled inward as a massive, black market mercenary ship forced an illegal connection. Its hull scarred and flaming, its insignia unmistakable. The Crimson Fangs, one of the deadliest mercenary syndicates in the galaxy, known for targeting diplomats and selling entire families to war generals. The aliens shrieked in terror, scrambling to evacuate. But the humans stayed planted exactly where they were. Faces pale but determined, hands gently touching their dogs' heads to steady them, to tell them without words, "We're here. We're ready." As the mercenary doors blew open, 10 heavily armored warriors stormed into the station. Plasma rifles humming with lethal energy, and their leader boomed, "We heard someone tried to steal our prize. We'll take him ourselves," pointing directly at Parker. The alien crowd collapsed into panic, hiding behind stalls, shields, each other. Yet the dogs stepped forward instead of backward, their bodies lowering into immediate attack stance, every muscle ready, every instinct sharpened. But something was different now. The humans stepped into formation with them. Reed on the left, Sarah on the right, Parker in the center, dogs in front, humans behind. A perfect, terrifying formation no species had ever witnessed, a unified pack. The mercenaries aimed their rifles, shouting, "Move, animals," and fired a warning shot into the ceiling, but the dogs didn't flinch. Instead, Max growled so deeply the metal under his paws vibrated, and when the mercenary leader laughed mockingly, something inside the humans clicked, something that only appears in Deathworld species pushed far beyond fear, silence. Total silence. Not panic silence. Human combat silence. The kind the galaxy had written warnings about. The kind even warlords feared. The kind that meant, humans are done talking. The aliens watching felt their blood run cold. Even the Crimson Fangs hesitated, sensing the shift, because suddenly the humans were not prey, not diplomats, not soft creatures hiding behind their pets. They were something far different, something far more dangerous, calm, focused, silent. And then Parker said quietly, "Maximum, that one word changed everything." Max barked once. Every dog launched forward simultaneously. Every human moved behind them instantly. It was not chaos, it was choreography. Dogs intercepted the rifles before they could aim. Humans redirected energy bolts with metal trays and shield panels. Dogs tackled armored legs and tore weapons from mercenary grips. Humans disabled targeting modules and slammed override panels. The aliens watching from balconies were frozen in awe and terror because they were witnessing something thought impossible. Animals and humans fighting not as separate beings, but as one unified organism. A pack. A family. A force of nature. The mercenaries screamed as rifles were torn away, armor dented. Legs swept from under them, and yet again the dogs showed restraint. They did not kill, they did not tear throats, they did not maul, they neutralized, disabled, protected. A massive wolfhound named Atlas rammed into a mercenary's chest so hard the armor folded inward. But instead of finishing him, Atlas turned immediately to shield a fallen alien child behind him, snarling over his shoulder like a guardian angel born in hell. A small terrier darted under a mercenary's legs, biting into the power cable of his rifle, short-circuiting it instantly, electricity crackling through the metal as the mercenary howled in shock. Shadow leapt onto the leader's back, ripping off his helmet and dropping it at Reed's feet like a trophy. And through all of this, humans moved with complete trust, knowing that their dogs would never let harm reach them. Within 60 seconds, 60 heartbeats, the Crimson Fang strike team was on the ground, defeated, disarmed, humiliated. Not a single civilian injured. Not a single fatal wound inflicted. Only one truth left behind. You don't threaten a human. You don't threaten a dog. But most of all, you never threaten a human dog's owner. The smoke from the mercenary ship still drifted through the upper docking ring like slow-moving ghosts when the entire Galactic market station fell into stunned, vibrating silence, every species frozen in place as the last Crimson Fang soldier collapsed to the floor, groaning in defeat while dogs surrounded him like silent sentinels and humans stood behind them as calm and steady as mountain stone, and for the first time in the station's long history, the aliens watching from balconies, corridors, holoscreens, and emergency shelters were not just afraid. They were shaken to the core, struck by a mixture of awe, disbelief, and something much deeper, a raw respect they had never felt for any species before. Ambassador Parker wiped dust from his face and checked Max for injuries, brushing aside scorch marks on the dog's fur with trembling hands as Max licked his wrist gently, reassuring him, and the simple act made several alien nobles gasp because they had expected victory to make the dogs wild, violent, unpredictable. But instead it made them softer, calmer, returning instantly to caretakers the moment the threat ended, proving beyond doubt that their aggression was not cruelty. It was loyalty weaponized by love. Meanwhile, Sarah knelt beside Shadow, hugging him tightly as tears of adrenaline streaked her face, whispering, "You saved my life." And Shadow pushed his forehead against her neck, tail thumping weakly on the metal floor as if to say, "I will always save you." And aliens felt another wave of shock hit them because they had never seen a protector comfort their partner after battle. It was always the other way around. But here, the dog soothed the human, and the human soothed the dog, a cycle of trust so emotionally powerful it pierced through the centuries of prejudice the galaxy held against Deathworld species. Then, as the last alarm faded and the emergency lights dimmed into steady white, the station commander stepped forward, armor scorched, voice shaking as he announced, "All sectors secure, threat eliminated." And a ripple of stunned whispers moved across the hall as the reality sank in. The station's elite unit had done almost nothing. The humans and their dogs had done everything. Word began spreading faster than light. Aliens pulled out their holo devices, broadcasting recordings, sending messages to their homeworlds, shouting to anyone who would listen. The humans didn't attack first, dogs defended first. They protected civilians before themselves. They saved us, not just their own. And at first the aliens spoke these words with shock, but soon their voices softened into something emotional, something fragile, something almost childlike: gratitude. A Quraysh mother approached Parker hesitantly, her 2 young children hiding behind her legs, shaking with fear until a Labrador named Bruno padded toward them gently, sitting down and lowering his head in that comforting posture only dogs understand. And the children slowly stepped forward and placed their hands on Bruno's fur. Their mother broke into relieved tears as she whispered, "Your creatures saved my daughter in the chaos, thank you." And Parker smiled softly, shaking his head, saying, "Don't thank us. Thank them," pointing at the dogs now resting near the humans, tongues out, tails wagging faintly despite exhaustion, still scanning the crowd protectively because rest didn't mean they had stopped guarding. And this behavior, hit the aliens harder than the battle itself. These dogs weren't tired soldiers demanding recognition, weren't machines shutting down after tasks, weren't predators bloodthirsty for more. They were guardians whose first instinct after violence was peace, comfort, safety. A Zorth noble, once the loudest mocker of human pets, stumbled forward, his voice trembling as he faced Max, Luna, Bruno, Shadow, and Atlas lined protectively around the humans, whispering, "I laughed at you today. I called you weak, but I have never seen such bravery." And he fell to his knees, an act almost unheard of for his proud species, bowing his head to the dogs instead of the humans, and the entire hall followed him, species after species lowering themselves in deep respect, not to humans, but to the creatures who fought for them without hesitation. Tears streamed from alien eyes that evolved in deserts, swamps, floating cities, frozen continents. Eyes that had seen wars, mercenaries, weapons, and death, but had never seen loyalty like this, never seen protection so pure, never seen a bond so unbreakable that even bullets and plasma couldn't fracture it. And then the biggest shift of all happened. A council representative from the distant Varel system recorded a live broadcast, voice shaking across millions of screens as she declared, "The galaxy must rewrite its laws. Any attack on a human dog is an attack on a sentient guardian. And any threat to a human will now be considered a threat to an entire pack." The entire hall froze as the announcement echoed. Aliens realized the truth they once mocked. Dogs weren't human accessories. Dogs weren't ornaments. Dogs weren't passive animals. They were family, chosen not by evolution alone but by the universe's strange sense of poetry. 2 predators who shared one heart split across 2 bodies. As the humans finally prepared to leave, Max nudged Parker's leg, guiding him toward the exit like a gentle knight escorting royalty, and one alien child whispered in awe, Are they yours?" And Parker looked down at Max, who lifted his head proudly, and answered softly but firmly, "No. We belong to each other." And in that single sentence, the galaxy felt its understanding shift forever, because the strongest force humans had brought to the stars was not their weapons, not their technology, not their armies, but the unbreakable love of a dog who would burn a galaxy to protect its human. As the humans and their dogs walked toward the exit of the Galactic Market Station, the crowd parted like a living ocean, thousands of aliens widening the path in absolute silence, not out of fear but out of reverence, their eyes following every step of Max, Shadow, Atlas, Luna, Bruno, and the dozens of other dogs who had stood against mercenaries with a courage no weapon could manufacture. And Parker could feel the weight of the galaxy watching them, their stares no longer mocking or cautious but filled with something deeper, heavier, almost sacred admiration. And even though humans had fought many battles across history, none had ever felt like this. None had ever seen their companions elevated not as animals but as heroes who had changed the perception of entire civilizations in a single hour. As they reached the final checkpoint, a massive hologram flickered to life on the central column, displaying the station's new emergency protocols, and everyone gasped as the updated law appeared in bright gold. Protocol Omega 45. No harm, threat, or capture shall be directed toward a human companion species. Any violation will be treated as a direct attack on a human diplomat and on the United Terran Authority. The aliens whispered among themselves in trembling voices. They made the dogs official guardians. The humans didn't ask for power, they earned it. We never knew loyalty could be a weapon. And the whispers carried through every corner of the station until even the council representatives stepped forward, their diplomatic robes torn and soot-covered from the battle, bowing their heads deeply before Parker and his team, an act that made every alien freeze in stunned disbelief, because the Council had never bowed to any species, not even the oldest empires, but now they bowed to humans in acknowledgement of something even their ancient laws failed to explain. A bond between two beings so unbreakable that it bent warfare itself. Parker felt Max's warm head nudge gently into his knee, grounding him back into the present, and he reached down to scratch behind the dog's ears. A gesture so small yet so powerful that half the aliens audibly gasped again because they had never seen affection used as strength, respect used as armor, love used as strategy. And then, softly, with trembling hands, a little alien child walked out from the crowd holding a single blue flower, the sign of deepest gratitude in her culture, and placed it gently on Max's back. Max froze for a moment, then wagged his tail so softly that the entire hall lit up with laughter and relieved tears, and more alien children rushed forward, placing tiny gifts on the dog's fur. A glowing feather, a small crystal, a handmade charm, a piece of fruit, a scrap of painted cloth. Soon every dog was covered in symbols of peace and gratitude, and the humans had to fight back tears as some of the galaxy's most feared species kneeled to pat the dogs' heads gently, thanking them in broken voices. Reed looked around and whispered, "We didn't bring soldiers, we brought family," and an elderly alien nodded slowly, replying, "Family is stronger than any army." As the humans continued forward, heading for the docking bay where their ship waited, the station announced through every speaker, "New Galactic Directive. Planet Earth and all Terran species are granted protected status. Threats against humans or their companion animals will no longer be tolerated." Dogs everywhere perked up at the sound, as if understanding they had just been officially recognized by the stars themselves. Sarah smiled down at Shadow, whispering, "You're a galactic hero now," and Shadow pushed his head under her hand like he didn't care about titles, only her heartbeat. When they finally reached the airlock, Parker turned back one last time, looking at the massive hall filled with faces. Fearful ones, grateful ones, hopeful ones, and he realized something extraordinary. Humans had not impressed the galaxy with strength or weapons or technology. They had changed the galaxy simply by showing loyalty, kindness, and the courage to protect what they loved. Max barked once, a deep, echoing sound that traveled up through the domed ceiling and through every corridor like a final declaration. And aliens instinctively bowed again because they understood that bark was not a threat, it was a promise. A promise that humans and dogs would always protect each other. A promise that danger would never stand unchallenged. A promise that the galaxy now had guardians who fought with heart, not hatred. As the ship doors closed, Bruno curled up at Parker's feet. Shadow leaned against Sarah. Luna rolled onto her side for belly rubs. Atlas stood guard near the cockpit, and Max rested his head on Parker's lap, closing his eyes peacefully, trusting him completely. Parker whispered, "Let's go home," and as the ship lifted off the station deck, thousands of aliens pressed their hands, claws, wings, or tendrils to the viewing glass in farewell, watching the humans disappear into the stars. And long after the ship vanished, the galaxy kept repeating one new truth, one that would echo for generations.